Do you cook for one and kind of hate it? The way that you're planning or not planning might actually be making it harder than it needs to be. And that's why I'm creating a two-part series on meal planning for one. In this video, I'm sharing my best ground rules for cooking for one to make it easier and more doable for you. And in the next video, I'm going to share with you my step-by-step process to make meal planning for one much easier. So if you cook for one, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you get all of the info that you need to stop wasting time and food when cooking for one. Okay, so before we get into this anymore, I wanted to stop and introduce myself really quickly. My name is Rebecca. I am a solo cook. I'm a dietitian and I specialize in cooking for one and getting away from dieting. So all of these things are kind of have that as a lens. And I love talking about cooking for one, and I think it's something that we don't think about except for in the ways of like, I hate cooking and you know, there's nothing wrong with not liking cooking, but I find a lot of people that I talk to about this don't like cooking for one, but like cooking for others. And so how can we bring in that enjoyment of cooking, but to do that for ourselves as opposed to only wanting to do that for others? Because that's not always an option for us. So with that said, kind of the plan for this video is to go over some kind of ground rules, maybe some things to keep in mind that are super important to help you be successful and also to like turn down the pressure here. And then kind of my 5, or I think there's 6, however many steps in my process of cooking or planning to cook for one. I wanted to share a couple of things that I hear that come up really often. I've experienced and felt this myself. It's a very universal feeling, but maybe to like make this connect more and feel more real. So here are a couple things that I hear a lot about meal planning or just cooking for one in general. So I find a lot of times that people get really excited about particular recipes to cook and then don't follow through with cooking them. And again, this is not a, why aren't you doing it? It's more of maybe this system isn't setting you up to be successful. It's a system problem, not as much a yourself problem. Another thing that I hear a lot is, like what I just said, feeling down on yourself or feeling shame or guilt for not being able to like follow through with whatever plan it is that you have or making a plan at all. And I'm guessing it's not you, it's the methods that you're using. And again, this is kind of a way to switch the way that we're thinking and also to practice different methods of planning to make things more successful. Again, when you cook for one, the expectations and the actual experience is quite different than cooking for a family. And so how are we gonna make cooking more enjoyable with those with what it's like to cook for one? I have found that it's really important to recognize that if something isn't working, it's not your fault. It's a matter of like changing or tweaking whatever it is that you're doing to make it work for you. I think, especially when it comes to meal planning, it's almost like people go from not planning at all to like planning everything and expecting it to just like work. And that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. And also, not only is there like a lot of pressure that comes with that, but also kind of it sets you up for failure and to feel like you're a failure. And when you don't have other people who are relying on you to prepare meals, or you don't have other people to like collaborate with when it comes to planning, it kind of just changes all of this. And I think it's helpful. What I found with clients and people that I've worked with on this is to just make it as easy as possible. Like honestly, as easy as you can do within the budget and the time constraints and whatever it is that you have, and know that none of this needs to be permanent. If you have a goal of cooking whatever, work to it. You don't need to go from what you're doing to where you want to be. There's a lot of steps that can happen in between. So just keep that in mind, because this can be complicated and it's really easy to jump all in, and I think that's a huge mistake that people make, is jumping right in and feeling like they should just be able to do it when it's pretty different than what you've been doing. Now I wanted to go over some guidelines or kind of ground rules when it comes to meal planning. So kind of along the lines of what I just mentioned, if you hate cooking, don't force yourself to cook. And this is huge. I feel like I hear a couple of things. Hating cooking just as a blanket statement, that's fine. And also hating cooking when it's just for me. And there's a lot built into that, and I am not, an expert into your own life and don't know what that hate looks like. But there are so many ways to feed yourself in a way that don't require cooking. And again, keep in mind, it might feel uncomfortable to give yourself permission to not cook, whatever that's gonna look like. And I think one way to make that feel a little bit easier is to recognize that this is not a forever thing. You're gonna have seasons of wanting to cook more, wanting to cook less. You're gonna have seasons of wanting to learn about it or not, and whatever. And the opportunities, the options, whatever, are endless. So there is no expectation for cooking, and I think that's a really helpful place to get started, because it's gonna take that pressure down, and it's gonna with that pressure and anxiety lowered, it's kind of opened the door for looking at things a little bit more rationally, a little bit considering what's going to work for you and adapting as you need to. And I think that's super, super helpful and important. And another thing too, along those lines, we don't all have the same resources or access to food or budget. And so work with what you've got. It's going to look different for everybody. Find the easiest way to eat that fits within your budget, your environment, whatever you've got. And I think it's really important to break down the meal planning process to acknowledge which part of that whole process you really hate. And it can be the cooking. That's totally fine. But if you're blaming it on the cooking, but it's really the writing grocery list or going to the grocery store or cleaning up, you're not really going to be able to address that and make eating easier for yourself, because you're focusing the thought or kind of that expectation on something that isn't actually what it is. So I want to break down quickly the main steps of meal planning or cooking, this whole process of eating. So it's going to include finding recipes, and there's a million ways to do that, writing a grocery list, going grocery shopping, preparing food, cooking, eating, and cleaning. The next tip that I want to share, again, before we get into actual planning, is to be flexible. And this is such a helpful and important thing to keep in mind, because by allowing flexibility to come in, we are giving we're reducing stress and kind of that pressure that builds up over expectations that we have. It also allows us to adapt and make the most out of whatever situation that we have. One other thing that I want to mention about flexibility is I find it super helpful to kind of have a plan and then use that as your backup, if that makes sense. So make your plan, look at what you've got kind of scheduled for that day. If you don't want to put any more effort or thought into it, you do, or you eat what you had planned. Or if something requires flexibility, you have to change, or you're not feeling it, that's 100% an option and encouraged as well, because we got to eat multiple times a day for pretty much our whole entire lives. So let's do what we can to make it enjoyable and something that we're going to want to do, because we got to do it. Got to do it. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. As you can tell, this is a separate video. This is becoming quite the way this is going, where I'm filming the intro and outro again, because things shift, and like I shared a ground rule, I'm being flexible and it's helpful for all of us, isn't it? Anyways, now that you have the ground rules for planning for one, in the next video I'm really excited to share how I actually plan meals. And these this guide, this plan is going to help you keep up with whatever it is that you're planning on, or like actually make the food that you're planning on. It's going to help you save time and save money and waste less food. Now, if this was helpful, go ahead and like and subscribe to the Cooking for One channel. That way you'll know when there's new content on Cooking for One, like part 2 of this video. The actual meal planning process is coming up next, and I'm really excited to share that with you. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What are some helpful tactics for you to make Cooking for One, or planning for one, planning meals for yourself, however you'd say that, to make that a lot easier? I would love to see what's been helpful for you, and I'm sure others would like to read that as well. And also along those lines, if you have any questions about this, ask in the comments. I can answer your comment or your question in the comments, or I can actually create a video to answer your question, because it's often just like what we're taught in school. You're not the only one who has that question. There's probably other people who do as well. So anyways, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.